Was Jesus wrong about the kingdom of God and the end time? The teachings of Jesus have left an indelible mark on the history of humanity, promising hope, transformation, and the establishment of a divine kingdom. However, when we examine Jesus' statements on the kingdom of God and the end times, a significant question arises. Was Jesus wrong about the timing and nature of the events he predicted? Jesus often spoke of a kingdom at hand and hinted at an impending end, leading many to believe that he expected the end of the current world order within his followers' lifetimes. Yet 2 millennia have passed without this kingdom manifesting in the way Jesus described. Today we will explore Jesus' apocalyptic claims in light of historical, theological, and textual evidence, aiming to show that his statements were mistaken or made up. Jesus' statements on imminent end times. Throughout the Gospels, Jesus emphasizes an urgent message. The kingdom of God is near, and his followers must prepare for an impending divine intervention. In Mark 1:15, he proclaims, "The time is fulfilled, and the kingdom of God is at hand." This statement reflects an immediate sense of urgency, indicating that this new kingdom was about to break into history. In several instances, Jesus speaks directly to his followers with an explicit timeline, suggesting that they would witness this kingdom's arrival. For example, in Mark 9:1, he tells his disciples, "Truly I tell you, some who are standing here will not taste death before they see that the kingdom of God has come with power." Statements like this convey a clear expectation that the kingdom would arrive soon, within the lifetimes of his audience. This sense of urgency continues in Mark 13:30, where Jesus assures his disciples that this generation will certainly not pass away until all these things have happened. His prophecy is part of a longer discourse describing cosmic events, signs in the heavens, and the coming of the Son of Man. The words "this generation" seem unambiguous, directly implying that Jesus expected a radical change to occur within a few decades. Yet this prophecy remained unfulfilled, as his followers aged and died without witnessing the expected transformation. The unfulfilled apocalyptic vision. If we examine Jesus' statements closely, his language consistently points to a soon-to-come apocalypse. For example, in Matthew 24:34, Jesus says, "Truly, I say to you, this generation will not pass away until all these things take place." The term generation would have been understood by his listeners to mean the people alive at that time, not some indefinite future group. Therefore, Jesus appears to have been wrong in his timeline, as these events did not occur within that generation or even in the centuries that followed. A major aspect of Jesus' teachings focused on an impending judgment and the arrival of a new world order. However, no such divine intervention occurred. The world remained under Roman rule. The temple in Jerusalem was destroyed by the Romans in 70 CE, and the early Christians, faced with disappointment, had to adapt their understanding of Jesus' words to account for the continued absence of the kingdom. This delay posed a significant problem for his followers, who initially expected a swift fulfillment of his promises. The Apostle Paul, an early Christian leader who also anticipated the end times, reflected this expectation in his letters, especially in 1 Thessalonians 4:17, where he writes that we who are still alive, who are left until the coming of the Lord, will certainly not precede those who have fallen asleep. Here Paul, like Jesus, expects the imminent arrival of the end. As years passed and early Christians died without seeing the fulfillment of Jesus' prophecy, this expectation became harder to maintain. Later, adjustments to a failed prophecy. As the promised events failed to materialize, early Christians were forced to reinterpret Jesus' teachings, shifting from an imminent expectation to a more spiritualized understanding of the kingdom. We see evidence of this in later New Testament writings, such as 2 Peter chapter 3, 8-9, where the author attempts to justify the delay by stating, "With the Lord a day is like 1,000 years, and 1,000 years are like a day." This reinterpretation introduces a form of theological damage control, suggesting that God's timeline is incomprehensible to humans, and that the delay is actually part of divine patience. However, this shift in narrative fails to address the original promise Jesus made to his immediate audience. If Jesus had meant that the kingdom would come thousands of years later, his statements to this generation would have been misleading. Moreover, the rephrasing implies a fundamental inconsistency, as the reinterpretation directly contradicts the urgency in Jesus' own words. By extending the timeline indefinitely, early Christians effectively undermined the immediacy that Jesus so emphatically communicated. Another way early Christians dealt with this issue was to reinterpret the kingdom as a purely spiritual realm. According to this view, Jesus established the kingdom of God within the hearts of believers rather than as a physical or apocalyptic transformation of the world. However, this interpretation seems to contradict Jesus' repeated statements about cosmic events and signs, which are hardly metaphors for internal transformation. The shift to a spiritual interpretation appears to be a retrospective attempt to salvage Jesus' predictions in light of their non-fulfillment. The historical context of apocalyptic expectations. In order to understand why Jesus might have made these statements, it is important to consider the historical context of first-century Judea. During this time, Jewish apocalypticism was widespread, and many groups expected God to intervene directly to free them from Roman occupation. Jesus' statements about the coming kingdom closely align with this apocalyptic mindset, in which God would overthrow oppressive forces and establish a reign of justice and peace. Jesus was not the only figure to hold these beliefs. Other Jewish teachers and prophets, such as John the Baptist, also anticipated an impending end to the current age. Jesus' teachings reflect this apocalyptic outlook, suggesting that he too shared the conviction that God would soon intervene dramatically. Yet, in retrospect, we can see that this apocalyptic vision did not come to pass, suggesting that Jesus was, like others in his time, mistaken in his predictions about the immediate future. This context also highlights that Jesus' message was likely influenced by the political and social pressures of his time. Many Jews expected a Messiah who would lead a revolutionary change, and Jesus' promises about the kingdom likely resonated with this hope. However, once the apocalyptic promises went unfulfilled, early Christians had to reshape the message to retain their faith and hope. Why these errors matter? The unfulfilled nature of Jesus' predictions raises difficult questions for Christianity. If Jesus, who is considered divine by Christians, was wrong about the timing of the kingdom, this challenges the idea of his omniscience. For centuries, Christian doctrine has maintained that Jesus, as the Son of God, possessed unique wisdom and insight. However, his erroneous predictions about the end times suggest that he was limited by the same misunderstandings as other apocalyptic thinkers of his time. This realization can be unsettling for many believers because it undermines the reliability of Jesus' words. If he was mistaken about something as crucial as the arrival of the kingdom, it calls into question the accuracy of other teachings attributed to him. Moreover, it challenges the foundational belief that Jesus' teachings are timeless truths. If he erred about the end times, it suggests that his knowledge was fallible and subject to the limitations of his historical context. The ongoing impact of Jesus' mistaken predictions. The effects of Jesus' apocalyptic teachings are still felt in modern Christianity. Over the centuries, countless groups and individuals have predicted the end of the world based on Jesus' words, only to face disappointment and disillusionment. This pattern of failed prophecy highlights the problematic nature of Jesus' statements. If he had not promised an imminent end, such predictions might not have become a recurring issue in Christian history. Furthermore, Jesus' unfulfilled predictions have forced the Church to continuously adapt its teachings to maintain relevance. Rather than acknowledging the potential for error, theologians and church leaders have reinterpreted or spiritualized Jesus' words to fit new contexts. This process, while essential to the Church's survival, ultimately reflects a fundamental inconsistency in the original message. By stretching the meaning of Jesus' statements to accommodate their delay, Christian theology sacrifices clarity and, arguably, honesty. The evidence from Jesus' statements in the Gospels strongly suggests that he expected the kingdom of God and the end times to arrive imminently, within the lifetimes of his followers. Yet history has shown that these events did not occur as he predicted. While later Christian tradition attempted to explain away or reinterpret these statements, the fact remains that Jesus' prophecies went unfulfilled. This unfulfilled expectation challenges the perception of Jesus as an infallible figure, raising important questions about the reliability of his teachings. If Jesus was mistaken about the kingdom's timing, it calls into question other aspects of his message and suggests that his words were influenced by the apocalyptic fervor of his time. In light of this, modern believers are left with a choice: to reinterpret Jesus' words in increasingly abstract ways, or to face the reality that his predictions about the kingdom were, quite simply, wrong.